There's a plant sitting in garden centers right now that you can shove into bad soil, forget about for 3 years, and it will still come back bigger, thicker, and more beautiful every single spring, while your neighbor is out there sweating over tomatoes that die every August. Most people think gardening means work. It doesn't. It means picking the right plants once. Today, 18 perennials you plant once and basically never touch again. And number 6 can literally outlive you. If you don't want to miss next week's video ranking all 18 by how little water they actually need, subscribe now, because that one might change what you plant next. Let's get into it. Number 1, daylily. Daylilies are the plant garden centers sell to people who've killed everything else and are about to give up. They grow in almost any soil, tolerate drought once established, and spread on their own into thick clumps that choke out weeds for you. A single daylily fan planted today can become a 3-foot wide clump within 2 to 3 years, and you never have to touch it. The trick with daylilies is that each individual flower only lasts 1 day, hence the name. But a mature plant produces so many buds that you get a continuous flower show for 4 to 6 weeks. Some modern reblooming varieties, like Stella d'Or, will flower again in late summer with 0 effort from you. You don't deadhead, you don't fertilize heavily, you don't stake them. You plant once and walk away. Here's the surprising fact almost nobody knows. Daylily flowers, buds, and even the young shoots are edible and have been used in Asian cuisine for centuries. But don't go eating your garden center daylilies without research. Some ornamental varieties and lookalikes can cause stomach upset. What matters for us is toughness. Daylilies survive USDA zones 3 through 9, meaning they'll live through brutal Midwest winters and scorching southern summers without a second thought. But there's one perennial on this list that spreads even more aggressively than a daylily, and if you plant it in the wrong spot, it will take over your entire yard within a single season. 2. Black-eyed Susans, Rudbeckia hirta. If daylilies are for people who've given up, black-eyed Susans are for people who want a garden that looks like a magazine photo by doing absolutely nothing. This is one of the most drought-tolerant perennials sold in North America, and it self-seeds so reliably that 1 packet of seeds can turn into a multi-year colony without you ever planting again. Black-eyed Susans bloom from early summer straight through the first hard frost, sometimes 3 to 4 months of continuous golden yellow flowers with that signature dark brown center. They thrive in poor, rocky, compacted soil that would kill most other flowering plants, which is exactly why you see them growing wild along highways and in abandoned lots. If a plant can survive highway median soil with 0 irrigation, it can survive your backyard. The one thing people don't realize is that black-eyed Susans are technically short-lived perennials, or biennials in some regions, but because they reseed so aggressively, the colony itself is essentially permanent, even though individual plants come and go. Leave the dried flower heads standing through winter instead of cutting them back. Goldfinches and other songbirds strip the seeds all winter long, turning your neglected garden bed into a free bird feeder. Coming up next is a plant that looks fragile, smells incredible, and will make your entire yard smell like a spa, but it thrives specifically because you ignore it. Russian sage. Russian sage is proof that the plants that look the most delicate are often the toughest. This is a woody-based perennial with silvery, aromatic foliage and tall spikes of lavender blue flowers that bloom for months. It's borderline drought-proof once established, and, this is the important part, it actually performs worse if you baby it with rich soil and frequent watering. This plant wants poor, well-drained, even sandy soil and full blazing sun. Give it that, and it will reach 3 to 5 feet tall and just as wide, forming a soft, silvery blue cloud that most gardeners pay landscapers hundreds of dollars to install. Deer and rabbits avoid it because of the strong sage-like scent. So if wildlife has been destroying your flower beds, this is one of the few flowering perennials that consistently survives. The surprising fact? Despite the name, Russian sage isn't actually a true sage, and it isn't native to Russia. It's more closely related to lavender and mint, and it actually originates from parts of Central Asia and Afghanistan. All it needs from you once a year is a hard cutback to about 6 inches in early spring. That's it. 1 5-minute job per year for months of flowers. Now, quick pause, because I want to hear from you. Be honest. How much time do you actually spend gardening every week right now? Is it a relaxing hobby, or does it feel like a chore you're falling behind on? If it feels like the second one, that's exactly why I make these videos. I'm building a library of plants that give you a beautiful yard without turning your weekend into unpaid labor. If that's useful to you, tap subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week's video covers the 9 flowers that survive being forgotten for an entire month while you're on vacation. All right, back to the list. 4. Purple Coneflower. Echinacea purpurea. Coneflower is a North American prairie native, which means it evolved to survive exactly the conditions most of us actually have: hot summers, unpredictable rain, and clay soil. It's one of the most pollinator-friendly perennials you can plant, attracting bees, butterflies, and later in the season, flocks of finches that come for the seed heads. Once established, usually after the first full year, coneflower needs almost no supplemental water even during moderate drought. Its taproot digs deep into the soil, searching out moisture other shallow-rooted plants can't, which is exactly why it survives conditions that would wilt something like a hydrangea within days. It blooms from early summer into fall, and unlike a lot of flowers, it actually looks intentional and architectural even after the petals drop, because the cone-shaped seed head stays standing. Here's what most people don't know. Echinacea has been used in traditional medicine for over 400 years, and it's still one of the most popular herbal supplements in the United States today, though scientific evidence on its effectiveness for colds remains mixed. Whatever your opinion on that, in the garden, it's simply a tough, reliable pollinator magnet that thrives on neglect. But the next plant on the list doesn't just survive neglect, it was basically designed for people who forget to water for weeks at a time. Number 5. Sedum Autumn Joy, Hylatella phaeum. Sedum, sometimes called stonecrop, is a succulent-type perennial, which means it stores water in its thick, fleshy leaves the same way a cactus does. This is arguably the single most drought-tolerant flowering perennial you can buy at a regular garden center, and it's nearly impossible to kill through underwatering. Overwatering is actually the bigger risk. Autumn Joy starts the season as tidy blue-green rosettes, grows into broccoli-like flower buds by midsummer, then bursts into pink to rust-colored flower clusters in early fall, right when most other perennials are winding down. That late-season color is incredibly valuable because it means your garden still looks alive in September and October when everything else is going brown. It also stands up through the first snowfalls, adding winter interest to an otherwise bare yard. The surprising fact: sedum is one of the last major nectar sources for monarch butterflies, migrating south in the fall, meaning this single low-effort plant can directly support an endangered pollinator species during its most vulnerable journey of the year. All it asks from you is well-drained soil. It will actually rot in soil that stays soggy, and full sun. Number 6 is coming up next, and I promised you this one was shocking. It might be the toughest, longest-living plant on this entire list. Here it is, the one I teased at the start. Peonies have a reputation for being fussy, old-fashioned, high-maintenance flowers. That reputation is almost entirely wrong. Once a peony is established, it is one of the lowest-maintenance, longest-living perennials in existence, and this is the fact that shocks people every time I say it. Peonies can live and bloom for over 100 years without division. There are documented peony plants still flowering in old homesteads and abandoned farm gardens that were planted before the plant's original owners were even born. Peonies need almost nothing from you. Plant the tuberous root correctly. The eyes, or growth buds, should sit no more than 2 inches below the soil surface, because planting too deep is the #1 reason peonies fail to bloom, and then leave it alone. No yearly fertilizing required, no replanting, no dividing unless you want more plants. They tolerate cold winters better than almost any other flowering perennial, actually requiring a period of winter chill to bloom well, which makes them perfect for northern gardeners who think nothing survives their climate. The blooms themselves are enormous, fragrant, and produced in such volume that a single mature plant can support 30 to 50 flowers in peak bloom, lasting several weeks each spring. This is a plant you could genuinely plant once in your 20s and still be enjoying in your 90s, or hand down to your grandchildren. All right, real talk. Quick pause here. Which of these 6 so far surprised you the most? I actually want to know. Drop a comment with the number, because I read every single comment on these videos, and it helps me figure out what to cover next. And if a 100-year-old flower that needs 0 yearly care doesn't convince you this channel is worth following, I don't know what will. So go ahead and subscribe, because we've still got 10 more plants to go, and several of them are even tougher than this one. 7. Hosta. Hosta is the plant that solves the problem everyone assumes has no solution. What do you plant in deep shade where grass won't even grow? Hostas are famous for their bold, textured foliage, ranging from tiny 6-inch mounds to massive 4-foot giants, and they come in shades of blue-green, gold, and variegated white that brighten up dark corners of the yard. Once planted, hostas require essentially no maintenance beyond an optional yearly cleanup of old leaves in fall. They spread slowly outward into thicker clumps every year, and they can be divided every few years to create entirely new plants for free, meaning one hosta can eventually fill an entire shaded bed without you spending another dollar. They tolerate poor soil, root competition from nearby trees, and being completely ignored for entire seasons. The one thing to know, hostas are a favorite snack for deer and slugs, so if you have either problem in your yard, this is the plant that will get eaten first. The surprising fact is that hostas were originally brought to the West from Japan and Korea in the 1800s and were initially prized purely as medicinal and food plants before ever becoming a garden ornamental. Young hosta shoots are actually eaten as a spring vegetable in parts of Japan today. Coming up next is a plant so tough, it was literally used by Roman soldiers. 8. Yarrow, Achillea millifolium. Yarrow is one of the oldest documented medicinal plants in human history. And in the garden, that same toughness translates into a perennial that thrives in poor, dry, rocky soil where almost nothing else survives. It has fern-like feathery foliage and flat clusters of tiny flowers in white, yellow, pink, or red that bloom for months, from early summer well into fall. This plant spreads through underground rhizomes, meaning it fills in bare patches on its own without you doing any additional planting. It's extremely drought-tolerant once established, needs no fertilizer, and actually flops over and grows weak, leggy stems if you plant it in soil that's too rich. The worse your soil, the better yarrow performs, which makes it perfect for problem areas where you've already given up trying to grow anything nice. The surprising fact, the plant's scientific name, Achillea, comes directly from the Greek hero Achilles, who, according to legend, used yarrow to treat his soldiers' wounds on the battlefield. It's been called soldier's woundwort for centuries because of its traditional use in stopping bleeding. Whatever you think of ancient battlefield medicine, in your backyard, yarrow's real job is simple: months of flowers, 0 water, and it laughs at soil that would kill a rosebush. Up next is a plant that pollinators are borderline obsessed with, and it smells like your grandmother's garden. 9. Catmint. Nepeta. Catmint gets confused with catnip constantly, and while they're related, catmint is the one you want in an ornamental border. It produces soft mounds of gray-green aromatic foliage covered in spikes of small lavender-blue flowers from late spring all the way through fall, especially if you give it one lazy trim midsummer, which takes about 5 minutes and isn't even required. This is one of the most drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, rabbit-resistant flowering perennials available, largely because of its strong, minty scent, which grazing animals actively avoid. It thrives in poor to average soil, needs no fertilizer, and actually performs worse in overly rich, heavily watered conditions, similar to Russian sage. It's commonly used as a problem solver plant by landscapers, specifically because it fills space fast, blooms for an unusually long season, and never needing replacing. The surprising fact? Catmint is a genuine pollinator magnet, and studies on garden plants have repeatedly found it to be one of the top nectar producers for honeybees and native bees, among common ornamental perennials, meaning this single plant can noticeably boost the bee activity in your entire yard. It's also obviously extremely attractive to cats, who will happily roll in it the same way they respond to catnip. Next up is a plant with leaves so soft people genuinely can't stop
touching it, and it might be the single easiest perennial on this entire list.
Number 10. Lamb's ear. Lamb's ear is grown almost entirely for its foliage. Thick, velvety, silver-gray leaves that feel exactly like their name suggests. It spreads into a dense, low-growing ground cover that actively suppresses weeds simply by covering the soil so thoroughly that weed seeds can't get enough light to germinate. This is one of the most forgiving perennials in cultivation. It tolerates poor, dry, rocky soil, full sun, partial shade, and long stretches without water. And it spreads on its own through underground stems, meaning a single small starter plant can cover several square feet within 2 to 3 growing seasons without any help from you. The only maintenance most people ever do is occasionally pulling out the center if it gets a little woody after several years, and even that step is optional. The surprising fact, those fuzzy leaves aren't just decorative. The dense hair covering, called trichomes, evolved specifically to reflect sunlight and trap a layer of still air against the leaf surface, which is what makes this plant so exceptionally drought and heat tolerant, especially in full sun, low water landscaping. It's also historically been used as a natural bandage in some cultures because of its soft, absorbent texture. Coming up next is a flower most people already have in their yard and have no idea how little effort it actually needs. Number 11. Coreopsis, commonly called tick seed. Coreopsis, commonly called tick seed, produces cheerful daisy-like yellow flowers non-stop from early summer through fall, and it's one of the most reliably drought-tolerant native perennials sold across the United States. It thrives in poor, sandy, or rocky soil, and actually struggles in rich, heavily amended garden beds, another plant on this list that punishes you for trying too hard. It's a fast grower, often flowering in its very first year from seed, and many varieties self-seed readily, meaning a small patch today can become a large established colony within 2 to 3 seasons with 0 additional planting from you. Deadheading spent flowers will extend the bloom season, but it's genuinely optional. The plant will keep producing new flowers regardless, just at a slightly slower pace. The surprising fact, Coreopsis is one of the most heat-tolerant perennials grown in North America, with many varieties continuing to bloom through extreme summer heat waves that shut down flowering in most other ornamentals, which is exactly why it's such a popular choice in southern and drought-prone states. It's essentially a set-it-and-forget-it plant that rewards you with color for months. Next up is a plant hummingbirds will fight each other over. Bee Balm, Monarda. Bee Balm produces striking, spiky, almost fireworks-shaped flowers in shades of red, pink, and purple. And it's one of the single best plants you can grow if you want hummingbirds visiting your yard daily throughout summer. It spreads through underground rhizomes into thick, established clumps that come back reliably every year, expanding your flower bed without any extra cost to you. This plant tolerates a wide range of soil conditions and is genuinely low maintenance once it's settled in, needing no fertilizer and minimal watering beyond its first season. The one thing to watch for is powdery mildew in overly humid, crowded conditions, but this is easily avoided just by giving plants a bit of breathing room when you plant them, rather than jamming them close together. The surprising fact, Bee Balm is a member of the mint family, and its leaves have a genuinely edible, citrusy oregano flavor that was historically used by indigenous peoples and early American colonists to make a fragrant herbal tea. In fact, it's sometimes called Oswego tea because it became a substitute for black tea during the Boston Tea Party boycotts. Coming up next is one of the most old-fashioned, nostalgic flowers you can plant, and it's shockingly tough. Shasta Daisy. Shasta Daisy is the classic, cheerful, white-petaled, yellow-centered flower most people picture when they think daisy. It's a hybrid perennial developed specifically for garden toughness, and it blooms prolifically from early summer through late summer with almost no input from you beyond planting it in a sunny spot. It tolerates average to poor soil, handles both humidity and moderate drought reasonably well, and forms expanding clumps that can be divided every few years to multiply your plant collection for free. Deadheading extends the bloom season, but even left completely untouched, a mature clump will
still produce a strong flush of flowers every summer without fail. The surprising fact, Shasta Daisy was developed by the American plant breeder Luther Burbank in the early 1900s, who spent over 17 years crossing different daisy species from around the world specifically to create a hardier, larger flowered garden variety, meaning this classic old-fashioned flower is actually a deliberately engineered plant, not a wild native. Next up is a plant that adds movement and sound to your yard, and once it's in, it basically never needs replacing.
Ornamental grasses. Feather reed grass. Ornamental grasses are the most underrated low-maintenance perennial category that exists, and feather reed grass is the easiest of them all. It grows in a tight, upright clump, meaning it won't spread aggressively and take over your yard like some grasses will, and it produces tall, feathery seed plumes that catch the wind and add movement and sound to an otherwise static garden bed. This plant tolerates a wide range of soil types, including clay, and handles both drought and occasional wet conditions without complaint. It essentially requires one job per year, cutting the whole clump down to a few inches in very early spring before new growth starts. That's the entire annual maintenance list. No fertilizing, no watering beyond establishment, no pest issues to speak of. The surprising fact, feather reed grass holds its upright form and seed plumes through the entire winter, meaning it provides visual structure and movement in your landscape even in January and February, when every flowering perennial on this list has died back to bare ground. It's one of the only plants here that genuinely earns its keep in all 4 seasons. Coming up, a plant so tough, it grows on literal rooftops. Hens and chicks. Hens and chicks are succulents, and their genus name, Sempervivum, literally translates to always alive, which tells you everything you need to know about how hard this plant is to kill. The hen is the main rosette, and it continuously produces small offset chicks around its base, which is how a single starter plant slowly spreads into a dense mat covering an entire area over a few seasons. This plant thrives in poor, rocky, well-drained soil and actually needs very little water. Overwatering is the only real way to kill it. It's commonly used in rock gardens, stone walls, and even green roofs because it survives in shallow soil pockets that would dry out completely and kill almost anything else. It's also extremely cold hardy for a succulent, surviving winters down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit in many varieties, which surprises people who assume all succulents are strictly warm climate plants. The surprising fact, hens and chicks have historically been planted on rooftops in parts of Europe, based on old folklore claiming the plant protected homes from lightning strikes and fire. While there's obviously no scientific basis for the fire protection, the plant genuinely does thrive in the shallow, dry, exposed conditions found on a real rooftop, which is likely how the legend started in the first place. 3 plants left, starting with the most fragrant, most famous lazy gardener plant of them all. 16. Lavender. Lavandula. We're ending on a favorite. Lavender is famous worldwide for its fragrance, but in terms of pure survivability, it belongs on this list because it specifically wants what most of us are bad at avoiding: attention. Lavender genuinely performs best in poor, gravelly, well-drained soil with minimal watering and 0 fertilizer. Rich soil and frequent watering are actually the 2 most common ways people accidentally kill lavender. Once established, usually after its first full year, lavender is remarkably drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, rabbit-resistant, and pest-resistant, largely due to its strong essential oils. It blooms in mid to late summer with fragrant purple spikes that can be left on the plant, cut for fresh bouquets, or dried for months of use in sachets, teas, and cooking. A light trim after flowering keeps the plant compact, but it's genuinely optional. Untrimmed lavender still blooms reliably the following year. The surprising fact, lavender's name comes from the Latin word lavander, meaning to wash, because ancient Romans commonly added it to bath water for its scent and believed antiseptic properties, meaning this plant has been cultivated by humans for cleanliness and fragrance for well over 2,000 years, and modern gardeners are still growing the exact same low-effort plant for basically the exact same reasons. 2 plants left, and the next one is the reason low maintenance and elegant don't have to be opposites. 17. Siberian Iris.
Iris siberica. Siberian iris gets overlooked because people associate irises with the fussier, bearded varieties. But Siberian iris is a completely different animal. It's one of the toughest, most disease-resistant perennials you can plant, with none of the maintenance headaches. It forms dense, grass-like clumps of narrow foliage topped with elegant blue, purple, or white flowers in late spring. And unlike bearded iris, it almost never needs dividing, staking, or spraying for pests. This plant tolerates everything from average garden soil to genuinely wet, poorly drained spots where most perennials would rot, making it one of the few flowering plants that actually solves a soggy corner of your yard instead of dying in it. It's also remarkably cold hardy, surviving winters down to zone 3, and once established, it shrugs off both drought and heavy rain without complaint. You can leave a Siberian iris clump completely undisturbed for a decade, and it will keep blooming reliably every single spring. The surprising fact, even after the flowers fade, Siberian iris foliage stays upright, narrow, and grass-like all season, giving your garden bed vertical structure and texture from spring through fall. Most gardeners plant it purely for the flower and end up keeping it for the foliage. One plant left, and it's a bulb that squirrels and deer won't even touch. 18. Ornamental allium. Allium. We're closing the list with allium, the ornamental cousin of onions and garlic, and it earns its spot for one simple reason. Almost nothing eats it. Deer, rabbits, squirrels, and voles all avoid allium because of its strong, oniony scent, which makes it one of the few spring bulbs you can plant without wildlife wiping it out overnight. A problem that ruins tulips and crocuses for gardeners across the country every single year. Allium is planted once, in fall, as a bulb, and then it comes back reliably every spring for years, with zero replanting. The globe-shaped flower clusters sit atop tall, leafless stems, giving your garden a striking, almost sculptural look that stands out above lower perennials. It tolerates poor, well-drained soil, needs no fertilizer, and once the flowers fade, the dried seed heads still look intentional and architectural, so you don't even need to deadhead it for the garden to look finished. The surprising fact, some ornamental allium varieties can naturalize and multiply underground over the years, meaning a modest planting of a dozen bulbs can slowly turn into several dozen blooming plants over time, entirely on their own, without you ever buying or planting another bulb. Quick ask before we wrap up. Drop a comment with your city or state and let me know which growing zone you're in. I'm genuinely curious how many of you across completely different climates are able to grow the same handful of plants from this list. And I read every single comment, so I will actually see it. Here's the pattern running underneath all 18 of these plants. And it's the one thing I want you to actually take away from this video. Every single plant on this list survives because it was never babied. Daylilies, coneflowers, yarrow, sedum, lavender, allium, these plants evolved in poor soil, harsh sun, drought, and neglect. And that history is exactly what makes them thrive in a modern backyard where you don't have hours every weekend to fuss over them. The mistake most new gardeners make isn't laziness, it's the opposite. It's overwatering, over-fertilizing, and over-fussing plants that were never designed for that kind of attention in the first place. The moment you start choosing plants that match the effort you actually have to give, not the effort a magazine tells you that you should give, gardening stops being a chore and starts being something that just quietly gets better every single year without you. If this list of 18 plants saved you from buying another plant that's just gonna die in July, the next video on this channel breaks down the exact opposite side of this, the 9 popular garden center plants that look easy but are secretly the hardest to keep alive, so you know exactly to avoid on your next nursery run. Subscribe now so you don't miss it, and hit the bell if you want to know the second it goes live. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I mean that. Go plant something, ignore it, and let it surprise you. I'll see you in the next one.